The heart is very important for life, and in times such as these, taking care of it is more important than ever before. Use heart to beat cardiovascular disease is the theme for this year's World Heart Day commemoration. Cardiovascular disease takes the lives of an estimated 17.9 million people every year, accounting for about 31% of all global deaths. World Heart Day is a reminder for people across the world to stop and assess lifestyle choices for them and their family, and also take strict steps to ensure the safety of their health against this disease. Consultant cardiologist and member Nigerian Medical Association, Professor Mbakwem, joins me now on the news to talk on this. Thank you for joining us on TVC Midday News.
Thank you for having me.
In recent times, we see there seems to be an increase in the number of cardiovascular diseases, especially the report. And now this year is commemorating using our heart to beat cardiovascular diseases. How do we do that, as the theme suggests?
Well, you know that every year the World Heart Day comes with a new theme. But the theme this year is an all-inclusive theme. Use heart to beat cardiovascular disease. So everybody gets involved. So use heart to make better choices, what you eat, what you drink, how you exercise. I'll use heart to teach my students better, to look after my patients better. And then the people in other sectors, like the people who take care of the environment, the civil engineers, should use heart to build better environments so that people can exercise. Most of our roads don't have, pedestrian walkways, so it's difficult for people to exercise, like in a city like Lagos. So it's an all-inclusive thing, even for the children, for the young ones. Use your heart to dream, because you can't achieve those, lofty dreams if you're not healthy, if your heart can't take you through the journey.
Absolutely. And talking about a healthy heart, how do we achieve that? We know the pressures that the pandemic has come with. A lot of people are under pressure. They are afraid of contracting the virus. They are afraid of relating with people. And so isolating themselves is also another issue that affects the heart as well. So how do we ensure a balance while looking to have a healthy heart at a time such as this?
Well, it's a good thing you brought up the topic, because during this pandemic, the people with heart diseases, got the wrong end, the bad end of the stick. They died more, they had more severe disease, they needed intensive care much more than others. While the death rate is about 2 to 3%, but if you had cardiovascular disease or any of the risk factors, your chances of dying is up to 10%. So if you're obese, that is, you're too fat, or you have diabetes, or you have hypertension, or you have heart failure, you've already had, some damage to your heart, then you're more likely to die. And a lot of the patients who already have cardiovascular disease, we had a lot of collateral damage. Right. When they decompensated, they were afraid to come into hospital. So because they didn't want to get the cardiovascular, disease. There was a study from the UK showing that a lot more people, died out of hospital from heart attacks, than the same period last year, because people were afraid to come into hospital. And for obvious reasons, because, it's quite scary when you look at all the things. And then people are sitting at home. If you've noticed after the pandemic, a lot of people
not having an active lifestyle.
Exactly.
Right.
So people have rounded up, and it's been shown that those who are obese are more likely to get the disease and have a worse, outcome, have a more severe, pattern of the disease. So sitting at home, so people sat at home, not exercising, eating all sorts, so that would also heighten the risk. A lot of people were drinking a lot more alcohol, during this lockdown. People who had stopped smoking had started smoking again because of the stress. And even the stress itself, the fear of the unknown. If you're afraid of something that you can see, you can either fight or run away from the danger.
You know how to deal with it.
Exactly. But this is an unseen enemy. You can't say it. All you hear are the frightening stories. And that stress itself can actually cause heart disease. There's a type of heart disease we call the broken heart syndrome, where you had a lot of those stress hormones like adrenaline floating around, much commonly seen in women, who are stressed out and all that. And the heart, they feel like they've had a heart attack, the heart can fail. So we've seen a lot of that happen during this pandemic because of fear of the unknown.
So first, before we look at diet, how should people know, conscious of the state of their heart? How do they begin to know that perhaps something is wrong? What are the signs and the symptoms that they can feel, then can perhaps now ask for medical attention?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. But what I would like to tell people is to check. Because one of the commonest risk factors for heart disease in Nigeria and around the world is hypertension. And it doesn't give you any symptoms at all.
Really?
No. I mean, we've had people would say your blood pressure shouldn't be more than 140/90. But I've had young people walk into my clinic with blood pressures of 200/120. And not that they had any symptom, but that somebody just checked their blood pressure, and found that it was high. So, my advice would be, anytime you have a contact with a healthcare personnel, you go to the pharmacy, you go to the hospital, you take a child for immunization, just stick out your hand and let somebody check your blood pressure.
As regularly as possible?
As regularly as possible, But ideally, we'll say at least twice a year or three times. But anytime you have contact, you don't lose anything. Because most times when patients come in, we don't even know when it started.
But can we then say that hypertension is a disease at its own?
It's a risk factor for cardiovascular disease.
Right.
Okay, because it causes some other things. Apart from the heart, it can lead to stroke. It can lead to kidney failure. It can lead to your arteries being clogged up in the legs and you can't work, and a lot of people would have to have amputations because of the pain, or maybe gangrene, the leg starts, getting rotten and has to be cut off. So it's a risk factor that we want to control, because we don't want to get the end of, to the end of the spectrum to see what happens with it.
So let's talk about perhaps a diet and lifestyle now. What is the ideal diet and lifestyle one should develop to maintain a healthy heart?
Well, ideal diet. So it's a balanced diet. And what we'll say is that your plate of food must have like 5 colors. Yeah. White, green, yellow, red, But like, in Nigeria, most of our, meals are monochrome.
White, yeah.
Just one color. Because what that means is that there's a lot of vegetables, there are fruits. So the carbohydrates we should cut down. So a bit of carbohydrate, a bit of protein, your vegetables and your fruits. And then vegetables, not necessarily the way we cook it. We cook the vegetables till they're all brown and there's nothing in it anymore. So freshly made vegetables, a lot of fruits, nuts, cut down on the carbohydrate, cut down on the salt, and that's that's the basic, thing everybody should be doing.
So what is the level of salt? Because this has been a recurring message, talking about cutting down on salt and sugar. What would be the ideal quantity to be consumed, perhaps on a daily basis?
Well, what they say is that a level teaspoon, that should be your salt content for the day. So not a full teaspoon. You fill a teaspoon and you level it with your finger. So that should be your content,
for the day.
For the day. But the thing is that the salt we put in the food we cook at home, it's not really the problem.
Oh,
because there's salt everywhere.
Right.
The Coke you drink, the biscuits you eat, all the processed food we eat. So when you control the salt at home, a lot of people are not mindful of the hidden salt content, elsewhere.
Consumed in other places.
So the thing is, every one of us should learn to read labels, especially the canned foods, because salt is also a preservative.
Right.
So if I want something to have a long shelf life, I'm going to put a lot of salt. So if I'm going to do that, you need to decant the solution in which the food is stored, and please try to wash it out.
All right, quickly, for those who perhaps have found themselves on the hypertensive side, talking about now exercise and lifestyle, what would you suggest? And for those who haven't, what kind of exercise should they be looking at?
Well, everybody exercises. Whether you should exercise.
Should, yes.
Whether you don't have any problem, you have hypertension, or you already have heart disease.
Right.
Because even people who've had heart attack, if I start from there, before we let them out of the hospital, we teach them a bit of exercise and how to be active. So WHO says we should walk 10,000 steps every day. 10,000 if you're counting. But we'll say do at least 30 minutes of exercise, at least up to 4 times a week. But exercise till you sweat a bit, till you drop a sweat. But you don't need to run. You don't need to jog. okay, brisk exercises. And then, you know, brisk walking is good enough. And you don't have to do the 30 minutes at a stretch. You know, if you have 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there, it adds, I mean, it all adds up by the end of the day.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Mbakwem, for your time on the Midday News.
Thank you for having me.